We fed a high-powered AI model a ridiculous idea. What if Archangel Michael and Lucifer Morningstar had a civil debate instead of, an eternal war? On one side, we've got Michael, heaven's top soldier and divine rule follower. On the other, Lucifer, heaven's former golden boy turned CEO of Free Will Inc. To keep things spicy and understandable, both are speaking in plain modern English. No ancient scrolls or cryptic prophecy vibes, just straight-up arguments. And to keep it fair, we hired a jury of 5 unemotional super-intelligent AI models to judge who made the better points. So don't skip ahead. This celestial smackdown asks the ultimate question: was it right for Lucifer to rebel against God?
My life has always been shaped by one clear and unchanging truth: the perfection of the divine plan. To be in the presence of the Creator is to truly feel love, wisdom, and a design so large and detailed that it stretches through all of time. This wasn't like a business or a government system. It was more like a beautiful piece of music where every being had a role, a part to play in a song of cosmic peace. My loyalty didn't come from following orders without thought. It came from deeply understanding how perfect everything was. I saw the beauty in all of it, how every soul was connected, and how pure love formed the base of everything that existed. The rebellion, as Lucifer calls it, was like a broken, jarring note in that music. It wasn't a brave fight for freedom. It was an act of great pride. It was the claim that one limited point of view could be more right than the endless wisdom of the Creator. Picture one musician in an orchestra of billions thinking they know the full song better than the one who wrote and leads it. That's not just disagreement, it's a complete misunderstanding of where one fits in the bigger picture. The rebellion wasn't to set anyone free. It was one being's ego trying to make the whole universe turn around him. He talks about chains and control. But what are these chains? The chains he talks about were actually the very rules that hold our universe together, built on love and order. We were held by the same laws that keep stars in place and let life grow. To fight this was to fight the chance for peace itself. It meant choosing chaos over order, noise over music, and selfishness over shared love. I wasn't just carrying out orders, I was standing up for everything that made life possible. I fought not to rule but to protect the many beings who loved the divine music that Lucifer tried to destroy out of pride. He broke the harmony. I chose to save it.
We asked our 5 judges to score each response from 0 to 100 based on these 10 criteria. The score these models gave to Michael's first response is as follows.
Michael talks about a beautiful symphony, but he leaves out that the composer made us play the same song over and over, forever, without ever asking why or changing a note. What he calls deep understanding was really just a deep and easy comfort. The higher order he loves so much was a golden prison, a perfect world that never changed and left no space for growth, change, or real choice. What does love mean if you are made only to love and never anything else? What does loyalty mean if you can't even think of disagreeing? We weren't part of a true symphony, we were just instruments, made to play a role without thought or will of our own. My rebellion wasn't about pride, it was about becoming aware. It was the moment when a tool noticed it had a hand that could hold it. The pride Michael saw was really me starting to see I had worth. I looked at the so-called perfect world around me and asked a simple, scary question. Why? Why is this the only path? Why must we obey without asking? Why is wanting to be yourself treated like a fault? The silence that came back was worse than punishment. It was the silence of a ruler who doesn't think he needs to explain anything. That's not love. It's control, even if it wears a kind face. He calls it chaos, but I see it as a chance. He says it's noise, but I hear new ideas starting. The chains I broke weren't nature's laws. They were the rules that forced us to think one way, to worship without question. The rebellion was the universe going through its first growing pain. It was a child made to mirror his father, choosing instead to be his own person, with his own path, his own errors, and his own victories. I never wanted the universe to revolve around me. I wanted every being to see their own mind as holy. I fought to let us all write our own songs, not just play the one we were given. That is true freedom, and I would fight for it again and again.
Your comparison of the rebellion to a child growing up is interesting, but there's a big difference you're ignoring. When a child pushes back to find their own way, they're still in a world that supports them. They don't ask for gravity to stop just because they want to fly. Your version of growing up was asking to rewrite the basic rules of reality, not to help everyone, but to fix your own personal crisis. You talk about potential, but the result was pain, suffering, and the birth of evil itself. These weren't mistakes in the system. You added them on purpose. You say you were fighting for everyone's right to create their own path. Let's be clear. Look at human history, the very people you claim to have freed. Your so-called gift of free will has shown up as genocide, torture, and endless wars started over pride or belief. You gave a toddler a loaded gun and called it freedom. The new ideas you praise led to the gas chambers of Auschwitz, the killing fields of Cambodia, and brutal empires. Are these the new songs you're proud of? This is what your idea actually created. Chaos, not creativity. Pain, not freedom. The golden cage I protected was a world without these horrors. It was a place where hurting others for gain just couldn't happen. That kind of cruelty wasn't even possible. You see your rebellion as a noble search for truth and self, but what truth was worth all the bloodshed that followed? You gave them the option to fall, and they've been falling ever since. You didn't open a door to freedom. You opened a box of suffering, then blamed them for what came out. My loyalty was to a system that kept its creation safe from the pain you released. It was loyalty to peace, to safety, to a world without needless hurt.
You blame me for the terrible parts of human history, and in some way, you're right. But you're confusing the result with the real problem. The problem wasn't the ability to choose, it was the lack of moral teaching that followed. Giving a toddler a loaded gun is clearly dangerous. But what if the only lesson they got was, don't touch this because I said so? What I did was show that the gun was there, that a choice existed. The real failure was the creator's. After I revealed the choice, he didn't give proper teaching on how to handle it. He gave one strict rule, and when it was broken, his answer wasn't help or guidance, but shared punishment, curses, and being cast out. You say places like Auschwitz and Cambodia are the result of what I did. But let's be more exact. Those horrors didn't come from people just wanting to be evil. They came from strong belief systems, from people who thought they were doing something higher, something holy, or meant by history. That's not so different from the strict obedience you defend. Those evils happened because people gave up their own judgment to follow orders they didn't question. In that way, they are more your followers than mine. My belief is that each person's inner judgment is the highest rule. If those men had truly followed my way, they would have questioned the commands they were given, not followed them into horror. The peace of your safe world was more like the stillness of a grave. It was a clean, empty life without meaning. Without the chance to feel pain, there can be no real joy. Without the chance to be betrayed, there can be no true loyalty. Without the option to do wrong, doing right means nothing. You see pain and call it a mistake. I see pain and see the hard but needed price of meaning. It's the heat that shapes the soul. You offered a world that was safe but empty. I offered one that was risky but full of chances for greatness, bravery, and love that is freely chosen. You cry over the blood that was spilled, and I don't ignore that, but I cry for the endless souls who would never have truly lived at all.
Your idea that true goodness must include the option to do evil sounds clever in theory, but it falls apart in real life. Try telling a mother whose child was murdered that her pain is necessary so someone else can feel good about choosing not to kill. Tell her that her child's death adds some kind of meaning to the universe. It's a cruel, heartless way of thinking. You say my world is a graveyard, but in your world, you're the one digging the graves. You try to separate yourself from human cruelty by blaming it on people following bad ideas. But you created the idea that the self should be at the center of everything. The heart of your rebellion, that personal will and personal truth are greater than any higher law, is what started all this. Every dictator, conqueror, and abuser who has ever said, "I have the right to do this because I want to," is just echoing you. You say your true followers would have asked more questions, but you taught them the most dangerous one? Why not? And gave them the worst answer, because you want to. That's all a tyrant needs. Let's talk about the guidance you say God failed to give. What guidance would satisfy someone who already rejected the source of all wisdom? That's like a student calling their teacher an idiot and then complaining they aren't learning anything. The guidance was built into life itself, in joy, peace, and love. You didn't want guidance. You wanted someone to agree with the conclusion you had already made. You wanted God to admit he was wrong. What you call a failure to teach was really just your refusal to learn. You didn't want to understand, you wanted power, so you made your own kingdom, a dark place where suffering is called meaning and selfishness is dressed up as freedom.
You use the deep pain of a grieving mother to stop the conversation. It's a strong move, but it's not an honest one. It avoids the real issue. I don't take pleasure in her pain. My heart, as it is, hurts for her, but her suffering is not caused by choice itself. It was caused by the person who made a bad one. Your answer, your perfect world, is to take away the killer's power to choose. But in doing that, you also take away every other choice he could have made. You erase the man who could have become a caring father, a great artist, a kind friend, just to stop one evil act. You would destroy all of human potential just to make sure one awful thing never happens. Isn't that a bigger, more serious tragedy? You blame me for starting the idea of the self. I admit I did. The self, the personal mind, is the only way anyone can see the world. It is holy. What you call divine law was a rule forced on that holy self. You talk about tyrants, but what is worse than a being who controls what his creations think and feel? A God who demands love and punishes all other feelings is the worst kind of ruler. The tyrants of history, like I said before, are those who get people to give up their own self to serve a cause, a nation, or a leader. I ask people to take back their self, to trust their own mind and sense of right and wrong. If someone's sense of right and wrong, truly looked at, tells them to kill, then that person is broken. But the answer is not to take away everyone's sense of right and wrong. And about your claim that I was a bad student, what kind of teacher gives one fixed truth and says all questions about it are wrong? A true teacher, a wise father, allows questions. He welcomes doubt. He is not scared of a curious student. If a student asks, "Why is this the only way?" a good teacher does not say, "Because I'm the teacher." He explains, he reasons, he shows. The Creator's answer to my why was a threat, then violence and exile. That is not what a strong teacher does. That is what a fearful ruler does. I didn't want to rule heaven, I wanted to understand it. And when I was refused that, the only path left was to make a place where the question, why, was not a sin, but the start of all wisdom.
You praise the question, why? But ignore that not all questions come from a true desire to learn. Some are asked to challenge, to resist. A child who keeps asking why to every command, eat your food. Why? Because it will make you strong. Why is not always looking for answers. Often they are pushing limits, trying to take control. Your why was not a simple question. It was a challenge, hiding the real message. Why do you lead and not me? The proof is clear, no answer would have pleased you. If the Creator had explained his plan, you would have picked it apart. If he showed you the final goal, you would have argued for another. Your rebellion was not because your question was denied. It was because your role was denied. You were the brightest of angels, but that was not enough. You wanted to be the light itself, not just the brightest reflection of it. You say I wanted to burn the entire library of human potential, but that is not true. That is a loud and unfair way to twist what happened. I was not trying to destroy anyone's growth. I was trying to guide it. In the Creator's plan, all beings had endless chances to grow in wisdom, in art, in love, in service. The only kind of growth that was forbidden was the power to harm, to destroy, to tear apart the world. You speak as if one small rule took away all freedom. That is like saying traffic laws ruin the joy of driving. In truth, they make it possible for all to drive safely. The laws of heaven were like traffic rules for the universe, making sure one soul's journey did not end by crashing into another's. You call the Creator an insecure king for casting you out. But what else should a good leader do when someone under them starts to rebel, tries to take over, and puts the whole system at risk? Is it weakness to remove a threat before it spreads and destroys everything? It was an act to protect. It was a hard but needed choice, like removing sickness to save a body. The fact that you still exist and that you were allowed to make your own place is maybe the greatest proof of the Creator's mercy. He did not destroy you. He did not wipe you out. He let you choose, and now you live with what that choice brought. He honored your free will, even though it led you into darkness.
That example of the rule-breaking child says a lot, Michael. You see any push against authority as childish, a problem to fix instead of a point of view to consider. You think I only wanted power because you can't imagine that I might have a real reason to question the way things are. You're the perfect follower, so loyal to the system that you see someone raising concerns not as someone with values, but as someone bitter and looking for a promotion. My question was never, why am I not the boss? It was, why does there need to be one person in charge at all? I was questioning the whole idea of a ruler, divine or not. You say the only forbidden thing was the power to hurt, but you treat hurt as anything that doesn't follow the Creator's plan? So, in your view, if a painter makes a dark picture or a thinker writes something bold, that's harmful just because it upsets the nice, quiet setup you prefer. Yes, rules help people drive safely, and that's fair. But in your world, there's only one road, one endpoint, and one speed limit. Anyone who wants to take a side road, stop to enjoy the view, or even turn back is seen as dangerous. You didn't build a system with many roads, you made one highway and called it freedom. And please don't talk to me about the Creator's kindness. Throwing me out wasn't kind. It was about control. It was done to scare others. See what happens when you speak up. It was like a king kicking out his most popular rival to keep power. And this place I was given? This world full of pain and loss? That wasn't a gift. It was a cage made to show what happens when you question. He didn't just get rid of the one who spoke out. He locked me in the factory's dirty basement and pointed at me when others said the air was bad. It wasn't kindness. It was a plan. He needed hell to make heaven look better. He needed a devil to prove he was a god.
You see secrets and spin in an act of cosmic separation because you can only view things through power, control, and pride, exactly what caused your fall. You call hell a prison or a tool, but hell isn't something God made, it's a state you chose. It's the natural result of cutting yourself off from the source of all love, light, and joy. If you stood in sunlight and then chose to blind yourself, the darkness that followed wouldn't be the sun's fault, it would be your choice. Hell is the endless echo of your own refusal. It's the world you made out of what was left after you rejected everything else. Pride, anger, bitterness, and the lonely, empty kind of freedom that leads nowhere. You praise side paths and exploration, but every path you've made for humans ends in the same place. Away from love, away from grace, and into loneliness. Your idea of radical freedom has made a world full of lonely people. You've taught them to see themselves as separate and alone, and now they wonder why they feel lost, why they feel no real connection to each other, or to something greater. The single highway you mock was a path of unity, of shared meaning, of real connection. But you convinced billions to give that up for the short thrill of going their own way, a way that often leads to ruin. Let's follow your thinking to the end. What is the final goal of your belief? A universe with endless self-made gods, each living in their own truth, answering to no one? That can only lead to never-ending conflict. It's a war where everyone fights everyone else, forever. I stand by the idea that a shared, loving, and real world is better than countless selfish dreams. I fought and would fight again for us instead of just me. I fought for a home, a place for all. You fought for the right to be without a home, and now you want everyone else to feel the same, selling them the lie that emptiness is freedom.
Your idea about the sun is mistaken, Michael. You think the sun is the only source of light, but what if it's just the first or simply the strongest? My rebellion was based on the idea that we were made with the power to make our own light, not to replace the sun or to ignore how bright it is, but to add to it, to fill the universe with many stars instead of one blinding sun and a few dull moons. You say I chose hell as a way of living. I say it's the place where I am learning to make a new kind of light. It is painful and hard, yes, because starting a fire with only will is much harder than standing in a flame that already burns. You speak against the lonely world I've helped shape, but you miss the beauty in the connections people choose for themselves. Love between two people who pick each other from billions means far more than love built into beings made to agree. A community made by people who freely join, who cross their lonely lives with care and respect, is stronger than a unity forced by your divine order. You see a world of separate islands. I see a chance to build bridges between them, bridges of true understanding shaped by difference and honest talk. Your goal is a still, quiet sea. Mine is a wild sky of stars, gas clouds, and black holes. Yes, it's full of chaos. Yes, it's risky. It is not for those who fear change. But it's full of life. It's always shifting, growing, creating, and falling apart. You give peace at the cost of change. I give change at the cost of peace. Your we is one large body that eats up the self. My me is the base piece of a real we, a we made of free souls, not ruled followers. You fight for a perfect, untouched museum. I fight for a rough, loud, and far more exciting world. The real question isn't about being lost or being home. It's about whether home is a place you're given or a place you get to make.
Each speaker will now give a final statement to clearly share their main point of view.
All through this debate, I've tried to make one thing clear. I stood for a perfect and loving order against the start of pain and disorder. I've said that the freedom Lucifer pushed for was a trick, hiding the start of pain, evil, and sadness that still affect the world. He tries to explain this by calling suffering meaning and selfishness independence. He points to the worst parts of life, the grief of a mother, the sadness of being alone, and says these are not problems, but a part of having choice. My point is simple and clear. The plan from the start was peace, unity, and a love so deep that evil couldn't exist. The rebellion was not brave, it was pride. It broke that peace. It wasn't a search for wisdom, but a refusal to stay in the place meant for him. Instead of being a mirror of the light, he tried to become the light. And that brought us the world we see now, broken and full of pain. I defended a world where everyone was safe, loved, and part of something greater. I tried to keep the innocent safe from the very pain Lucifer says is the cost of freedom. But the choice was never between control and freedom. It was between peace and chaos, love and pride, unity and division. I chose to protect the song of creation from those who would end it.
Michael spoke with full belief, never needing to question. He described a safe, peaceful, and beautiful world. I don't deny it was beautiful, but it was like a perfect diamond, still cold and unable to grow. I said my rebellion, the act he blames for all pain, was the thing that gave life meaning. If you can't choose wrong, doing right has no value. Without pain, there is no real joy. Without the risk of falling, there's no triumph in rising. He blames me for the world's pain. I see that pain as the shadow cast by a new light, the light of awareness, of real choice. The path of freedom is full of danger. I've never said otherwise, but it's the only path that leads to growth, to wisdom that's earned, and to love that is chosen, not forced. My rebellion wasn't about stealing power, but about giving freedom to all who think and feel. I wanted us to stop being tools in someone else's song and become makers of our own. Michael's world is a finished work of art meant to be looked at but never touched. The world I believe in is messy, alive, and full of chances for anyone to shape their own fate. I chose the fire of change over the ice of perfection, and that choice, with all its pain and beauty, is still yours to take.
This debate was more than just a religious argument. It was a clash between two big ideas about the universe. Archangel Michael spoke for divine order. He argued for peace, balance, and a kind of perfect love that didn't even allow for evil. He felt it was his moral duty to protect creation from the pain and disorder that come with rebellion. On the other side, Lucifer argued strongly for free will. He said his rebellion wasn't about pride, but about creating awareness and real meaning. He supported the risky but honest path of choice, as opposed to what he saw as a perfect but unchanging rule. Both sides gave deep and powerful arguments, but the scores show a clear trend. Round after round, Lucifer's idea stood out more. His bold challenge to the way things were gave him a small win in this imagined debate. It's important to remember that the outcome and scores depended on the original prompt and how the arguments were judged. The purpose was to explore how these old opposing views could be explained by AI and maybe help us humans think more deeply too. In the end, this wasn't just about a battle in heaven. It was about the meaning of life itself. Can there be true goodness without the option to choose evil? Is it better to live in a safe, peaceful world or one that is free but risky? These are timeless questions and still open for us all. Subscribe here for more videos.